Well, good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Save Honey Hill Action Group, I would like to welcome Catherine Morris from Horningsea Parish to talk about the proposed relocation of the Milton sewage works to Honey Hill, which has been undergoing consultation. Well, good morning, Catherine.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. We're now very close to the end of the consultation period, so I wondered if you would like to comment on the overall framework of the consultation to start with.
Well, yes, I think in a nutshell, the consultation period has been far too short. I think it's been or will be about 5 weeks in length, and it started on the 8th of July. It will conclude on the 19th of August. And speaking from a personal point of view, the first that I became aware of this project was when a license landed on my doorstep requesting that my husband and I sign it, giving permission to surveyors to come and survey our property. And it came completely out of the blue. Obviously, mad panic ensued at that point, and lots of emails and such like going from Fen Ditton to Horningsea, within Horningsea and all over. I think with the launch last week of NECAP, the North East Cambridge Area Action Plan, which has a much longer consultation period. I think that goes through till mid-October. And bearing in mind that these two projects are completely dependent on each other, really, it seems extraordinary that such a major project as moving a sewage works, which is going to have an impact for decades, it is given such a short consultation period. It's remarkable. And of course, that's on top of the fact that we're now in the middle of the summer holidays. People are going away. We've had COVID, so all meetings and discussions are having to be done online, and thank goodness for Zoom. But it's totally inadequate. It doesn't allow for a proper consultation period at all, with all the usual exhibitions and meetings and discussions that you would normally expect. It's just ridiculous.
Yes, I understand the difference between this process and the regular planning process, which would allow for all of those things to happen. This is come out under a development consent order, which would normally have a shorter consultation period. But I think it underlines the driver behind this as to really get this moving as a result of some, you say the NECAP, but also as a result of the Housing Infrastructure Fund. On the questionnaire, there was no option to comment on remaining where it is, treatment works remaining where they were. And I understand in 2014, they had a major upgrade. I wonder if you'd like to give us your comments on that.
Well, yes, I think on the first part of your point there, with regard to the three choices that we had, it was a choice between our site here at Honey Hill and then the two sites over Land Beach and Milton Way. And I think the first thing to note about that is that there's no option for the sewage works to stay where it is. And I think put all three sites together and the people who are affected, they would all say that it's probably in exactly the right place as it is. And why not spend the money upgrading the current sewage works? So it does seem extraordinary, really, that hasn't even been put forward. And I think it's really quite inappropriate to pitch these three locations against each other, which is inevitably what's been happening by virtue of the interactive map that's on the CWWTPR website. Horningsea, Honey Hill, has been absolutely inundated with comments saying that this should be the chosen site. Well, if you consider the number of people who live in and around the other two areas, you've got Histon and Impington, you've got Land Beach and obviously Milton. Just by sheer numbers, that's obviously had quite an impact on that interactive map. Sorry, the second part of your
was that the Anglian Ward had spent £21 million.
Yes, well, there we are. this is the other thing. When you start delving into all of this, we all kind of go around, don't we, in our own little world, certainly, as long as the perception is that nothing much is going to affect you, things just go on and happen, and you're none the wiser. But as soon as something like this comes up and you start really looking into things, I had no idea that back in 2014, 2015, £21 million was spent replacing the 25 tanks that were at the sewage works with 8 new super duper ones. And this £21 million was taken from our money, water rates. We paid for it. And my husband, who loves a bit of research, he found a publication, I think it's called Water Briefing or something or other, obviously an industry publication of some kind. And the quote he lifted from that was that this £21 million was future-proofing the Cowley Road site for decades to come. And yet in less than 1 decade, they are now putting forward this relocation project. And I mean, bearing all of that in mind, one could also then argue that by moving the sewage works to any one of the 3 proposed sites is not future-proofing for the next however many decades either, because with kneecap happening, and if you look at the map of that and how the spread is permeating out into the surrounding area, it's only a matter of time before the new sewage works, wherever that may end up, will start to be eaten up by housing in a similar way to the current one. So are they then in 20 or 30 years' time going to be looking for yet another site to move the sewage works to? I know that in these things they only tend to look 30 years into the future, but maybe to rethink that. You know, maybe they need to think about longer term solutions.
Yeah, indeed. And I think what has been, how Anglian Water responded is that the consultation is only about the location of the 3 potential sites for the relocation. I'd like to bring you back to the sort of catchment area question, because in Fen Ditton we ran an event on last Saturday, and we had a lot of folk who did nothing about this, who'd come up from Ditton Lane, who'd come up even from Middle Cambridge, who knew nothing about this. And so I think it does question the catchment process. And we know that Anglian Water delivered, we understand, 15,000 questionnaires to homes, and quite a large swathe of those areas were missed out who have an interest in Honey Hill. So I think for a number of reasons, and the questionnaire was horrendously difficult to fill out.
I have spent a lot of time pinging emails off to the info@cwwtpr email address, and I would just like to say at this point I've only had maybe 1 or 2 generic responses to about 10 or 15 emails. But I think this goes back to the point I was making before. Unfortunately, these companies, on the basis that people, unless things are really in their face and really obvious to them, they work on the basis that as long as they do the minimum, they're okay. I know that Fen Ditton, down Ditton Lane towards Newmarket Road, as you said before, they had no idea that this was happening. Quay had no idea that this was happening until we got in touch with them. The pamphlet that Anglian Water sent out, which arrived on my doorstep on the 10th of July, therefore 2 days already into the consultation period, was addressed to the owner-occupier. And it transpired over the next few days that people were coming forward saying, well, I haven't received that, I haven't received that. And of course, it transpired that a lot of people had just put these things straight in the recycling because they were generically addressed. Now, you can't tell me that Anglian Water don't have the name and address of just about every household in their catchment area, because they bill us, for goodness sake. But of course, they know that anything that comes through the door that's addressed just owner occupier, people just they ignore it on the whole. And it was only because I'd had the day before this license arrive that I opened the envelope, because I suspected it was something to do with this project. So that was completely flawed. So not only have they not sent them to a wide enough catchment area, but they've done it in such a way that the ones they have sent out have possibly been overlooked anyway.
And I also think that the point was missed, that it's actually per householder or per person living in the house, and so not just one response from a
Yes,
particular household.
absolutely, absolutely. Yes, what can I say? Of
Okay.
course, of
Yeah.
course, everybody. I have 2 adult children living at home here at the moment. Is their view not relevant?
So maybe we can move the conversation along to some of the key areas of concern that we have about the potential relocation to Honey Hill.
Yeah.
And first of that is the greenbelt question,
Mm.
which, although each of the proposed sites are on greenbelt, we believe that greenbelt surrounding Honey Hill is of a much higher quality. I wondered if you could talk to us about that a bit more.
Well, yes. I mean, I think I really have been very keen throughout all of this to steer away from NIMBYism, because it's not helpful. It turns people off, and it's not a good argument. But I think the first thing that I would say is that you only have to drive up the slip road from the A14 up towards Horningsea if you turn left, Fen Ditton if you turn right. It hits you in the face how different these sites are. That's the first thing I would like to say. The land at Honey Hill is very flat, exposed, open farmland. You can see for miles. I can't say the same for the other 2 sites. They are all greenbelt. You're absolutely right. But I think the main distinction is that the other 2 sites already have brownfield elements to them. You know, one of them has the landfill. You've got the park and ride over there. There, I believe, are plans for police station and the fire station to go over there. So there are very clear distinctions in that respect. I also think it's really important, this issue of precedent. Once something like this is built on, it does set a precedent for other development to occur. And I think it's just so important that we, if we are going to develop Greenbelt, that we are very choosy about what we put there. And this land is quite vulnerable land. I said in my interview with Jeremy Salis that I'd spent a couple of sleepless nights trying to get my head around some of the geology of the land at Honey Hill. I'm not an expert, I'm really not, but you can see quite clearly when you look at the Magic Maps website, for example, that there are very clear distinctions between the land at Honey Hill and the other 2 sites. And logic says to me that you wouldn't want to put a sewage works on land which is high risk to groundwater contamination, for example. I was talking to somebody on Sunday who knows an awful lot about these things, and she said that they got it right back in 1890 when they decided to put the sewage works where it is now. They were not wrong in choosing that location. It's galt clay, so it provides this natural seal, which Honey Hill cannot do. It's not made up like that. So it's not just the fact that it's greenbelt, it's also the fact that it's not the right sort of land either, which I think is incredibly important. And we're going to be judged by our children and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren on these things. If this turns out to be a complete disaster, we're the ones that they're going to look to and say, why didn't you do more? Why didn't you fight harder?
Indeed, and so I think the followers of this campaign, the phrase "no if onlys," we don't want to look back to think that we hadn't done everything we possibly could. The other point on the Site 3 is that it's a higher quality greenbelt. It's at least 1.2 kilometre distant from the nearest brownfield land. But
Mm.
also, as the Cambridge Greenbelt study, and I'll quote from that, concluded that Honey Hill is one of the greenbelt land considered to be most critical, that it should be afforded the greatest protection. It is
Mhm.
particularly important to safeguard key areas of rural land between the villages closest to Cambridge. The
Mhm.
three Eastern Fen landscape character areas is an important part of that setting and special character of East Cambridge and should be preserved.
Mm.
So let's move on, shall we, to the other issue that we have, that Honey Hill is at the start of the Wickham Fen vision, representing a stage in the Green Lung to the northeast of Cambridge. I wonder if you had some comments you'd like to make about that, Catherine.
Well, yes, I don't know an awful lot about this Wickham Fen vision, but I know it's been for a long time. Of course, National Trust own Wickham Fen, and as far as I'm aware, this is still very much part of their vision, and would stretch down from Wickham Fen through Quai Fen and join up with Honey Hill, providing an incredibly wonderful area for nature and flora and fauna, etc., to thrive. And I think one of the things that I feel very passionate about with regard to this area as well, it was really highlighted by lockdown and during COVID-19 and all of that. I got outdoors, much more than I perhaps would normally be able to do with constraints of work and everything. And, I know myself suffering from quite acute anxiety from time to time, how important the outdoors is, and being able to get out into the middle of nowhere, if that is possible round here anymore, but you can get pretty darn close to it when you walk out Quai Fen way, and the incredibly soothing impact that can have on one's mental health. And I think by building at Honey Hill, you're obviously completely compromising that whole vision that Wickham Fen has, and you're completely breaking the stretch of land that would then allow even people who are going to be buying houses at the Marley development at Marshall's. I mean, how are they going to feel about having a sewage works just across the way from them and interrupting the access that they could have to the outdoors and all this wonderful nature on their doorstep?
A great point, Catherine. And obviously, under the Cambridge East Area Action Plan, which it looks at the development of land and buildings, one of their undertakings is to provide routes to areas of natural beauty and biodiversity, which in the case of Marley would actually mean going through or making access through some parts of High Ditch Road and using the very flyover or bridge over the current A14, which is below grade, to access the area of the Green Lung. I mean, the Green Lung is supported by National Trust, CPRE, Natural England, the Wildlife Trust, and more recently, Rewilding Europe, a major European concern. And it's a bit rather, a statement I like to say is that Cambridge is known for its university and its intellect and all of the good things about industry as well, technology and innovation. But how would the world judge it, putting a sewage works at the start of its large initiative on the biodiversity and Green Lung of Cambridge? It really just doesn't make sense.
Well, it doesn't. Well, it doesn't. Sorry to interrupt you there. But what's even more balmy is when you look at the Kneecap project and their flyer that they've put out this week with their wonderful artists' impressions of what that's all going to look like. And they bang on about the wonderful green spaces they're going to create and the cycleways and all of this sort of thing, which are all going to be man-made in the end, of course, because there's a sewage works there at the moment. And they're doing that at the expense of this high quality green belt land. So they're moving brownfield to greenfield, to green belt, in order to create some green space.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It just doesn't make sense. It's crazy.
Can I move on to probably the penultimate area of concern that we have? It's over the heavy goods vehicle movements. and the huge increase up to 73 lorries into the works and 73 on the way out, so over 146 movements per day. It's coming in through an area of concern in terms of the narrowness of the lanes and the access routes and the traffic. Would you like to say a few comments about that? Obviously, in particular reference maybe to the Horningsea side and the school at Horningsea.
Well, to be honest with you, Mark, there's not an awful lot I can say because, again, we don't know. We don't know where the access roads are going to be. The two possible options are one coming off the A14 at Horningsea and going up that way, Stouts Corner, that way into the site. I don't know anything about traffic management or roads or anything like that, but I wouldn't have thought that flyover and the road there are suitable for that number of HGVs coming and going every day. So presumably some sort of major road improvement works would be necessary there. We've only just in the last, I don't know, Mark, maybe you can tell me, when did we get our cycle path from Horningsea to Fen Ditton? Was it 5 years ago, 6 years ago? Something like that.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Less than that. So that's going to be compromised by all these heavy goods vehicles, should they be coming that way. And then the other option, of course, is coming off at Quay, where there is already the roundabout. But then they've got to cross over Newmarket Road to get down High Ditch Road. So presumably some form of traffic or road improvement will be needed there. Traffic lights, presumably.
Well, yeah, we believe that would be a significant multi-billion-pound road improvement they'd have to do. And it also crosses National Cycleway 51. And then on the top of that, it actually goes through Fleam Dyke, which is an area of Heritage Way.
Absolutely, and that whole road along there is currently unsuitable for HGVs, correct me if I'm wrong. So all of that would need to be upgraded, which obviously would cause problems for Fleam Dyke. And also you're crossing over another cycleway there, aren't you? As soon as you cross from Newmarket Road to High Ditch Road, there's the cycle route there, which is compromising cycle routes to Bottisham Village College. You know, my children used to cycle occasionally from Horningsea to BBC. So you're and this is the other thing. We have no school bus in Horningsea anymore. They've taken that away, which we suspected would happen when the cycle path was put in. So a lot of children from Horningsea cycle to Fen Ditton School, the primary school there. Again, there's a question mark over whether or not Fen Ditton Primary School has been included in the consultation, because there is a big knock-on for them.
And they would be very much affected by the lorry movements as well if they were to happen.
Absolutely. And let's be clear, I've heard that we're talking lorries coming and going from the site maybe every 5 minutes. Some people say 10, every 10 minutes, which is bad enough. But I've been told it's actually every 5 minutes, because every lorry that arrives has to leave again.
Well, absolutely. And I think the figures quoted in the documentation are 73 lorries a day. And as you say, twice that amount going and going out. But if the frequency is really determined about whether the site is open 24 hours, 7 days a week or not. And
well, again, we don't know that, do we?
But on the assumption that it isn't that, because obviously it's in a residential area, it has to go through, the lower number of operating hours, the higher the frequency of the lorries as a function of that. Anyway, I think let's move on to one of the last areas, which is the size of the plant. We understand now that it's in some areas going to be like 26 metres high. And there is an eastern approach vista, which is renowned for coming in from the Suffolk area into the vista of Cambridge, which would compromise, but also the local villagers who have to overlook Honey Hill as well. I think this again, the scale of the plant is really not in tune with the open countryside of Honey Hill.
No, and again, same old. We don't actually know for sure, or I don't believe we do, because I don't feel I can trust Anglian Water when they say it's going to be 22 hectares or the tanks are going to be 26 metres high. It started off, and to be honest, Mark, I've lost track, quite honestly, with all these different measurements and where they've come up in various documents. But it started as 16 metres last week, I think it was, or the week before, and now we're up to 26. So
I think it's indication of the speed at which this is trying to be pursued. I think we need to close now, Catherine. But what's your advice? People need to do what? They need to go online.
People need to fill in they need to complete their feedback forms. They need to go online to the interactive map and comment on the 3 sites, not just site 3, but sites 1 and 2 as well, I think. They need to send emails, info@cwwtpr.com. They need to ask lots of questions, because Anglian Water have a duty to respond to those questions. So send your questions in on individual emails, maybe, rather than several in the same email.
Thank you, Catherine. And also visit Save Honey Hill, which is a YouTube channel which outlines the issues and arguments that we have against the location of Site 3 that we've been discussing today. So, Catherine, thank you so much.
And email Lucy Fraser.
And thank you for listening. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.